Hello, just a very quick intro to this video. Since this video was made and before it gets uploaded, some developments in the Spider-Man franchise have actually happened. On the screen right now should be a screen capture of when the video was actually uploaded. I'm ready to go on YouTube, and 2 hours later the video was uploaded at 1:20 a.m. scheduled to go online at 4 p.m. 2 hours after it was uploaded, Sony and Marvel broke the news for what would be happening to the franchise. Sony apparently are going to be doing a soft reboot of the character, recasting the character. They'll have creative decisions, but they'll be partnered with Kevin Feige and Marvel for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm not going to go in depth because, quite frankly, news outlets have been covering this thing pathetically. I'm hearing conflicting reports all over the damn place. One website says Sony have final say, another website says Kevin Feige and Marvel have final say. There's one website that says that the Marvel Cinematic Universe slate of films such as Inhumans, Black Panther, Thor, that those release dates are unchanged. Another website says that the release dates have been pushed forward. I have been on 4 websites, and 4 of them have had separate, different release dates for Thor Ragnarok. It's absolutely pitiful, and I'm sorry, movie journalist websites, but this is why the movie news sphere right now is considered a joke by many people. Have you spent so long making clickbait articles that you literally have no idea what to do when actual news comes knocking at your door? Anyway, it's too early to really comment on the news right now because there's so many conflicting reports, so much we don't actually know. So I'll get to that at a later date. But without further ado, this is what I originally had to say before this news dropped. Enjoy, and sometimes that it just happens like that. Anyway, enjoy the video. Thank you.
What is all this?
The future.
What about Peter?
Not everyone has a happy ending.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Trilbee and welcome to another installment of Trilbee Vlogs. I apologise for there not being a video last week. Lots of things got in the way, lots of personal stuff, so I apologise for taking the week off. And also I'm sorry for this video being late because once again lots of stuff happening in my life. I've had to transport a lot of people around for hospital visits and do a lot of family errands. Don't worry, there's nothing serious or anything. I've not been in hospital or anything, but just a few things, I guess, things I've got to do, things I've got to, I'm obligated to do as a family member, because that's kind of what happens. But yeah, that's currently going on. So I apologise for this being late, and this topic this week comes in from Dean Jones, and it's Spider-Man related, but I promise that the Spider-Man 2 video I made last week and this one are not related. It was not meant to pan out this way, it just sort of happened that there will be 2 Spider-Man videos in a row. It just sort of happened like that. Dean Jones writes, what do you think will/should happen to the future of the Spider-Man movies? Now, Dean Jones, thank you very much for the question, Dean. He asks 2 questions there. What do you think will happen, and what do you think should happen? Now, before we get to answering those questions, let's talk context, because, you know, I love context, me. So what happened is that in 2007, Sony Columbia Pictures released Spider-Man 3. It was a big hit, big success at the box office. However, it really split critics and audience members alike. Some people really hated it. Some people thought it was pretty good. I don't think there was a lot of love for Spider-Man 3. I personally am one of its defenders. I don't think it's a great film. I think it's okay, but heavily flawed, very flawed. It's definitely the weakest of the 3, and in terms of all 5 Spider-Man movies to date, it is right down the middle. It is the third. It's the middle best. So yeah, and what happened is that makes a lot of money for Sony, and Sam Raimi says, okay, for Spider-Man 4, I have plans. We'll get John Malkovich to be the Vulture. We'll get Black Cat involved. But what I would like to do is that, because I've spent the past 6-7 years making you 3 massive blockbusters, making you billions of dollars, but putting a lot of work into that, I would like a year break. I would like a year to take stock, to come up with the script, to really hone everything in so we know exactly what we're doing and we know what we're doing with the story. I would like a year off. And Sony says, okay, Sam Raimi, how long would you need? When would you want the movie done by? And Sam Raimi says, I would want it would have to come out in 2012. And Sony says, nope, we want a Spider-Man movie by 2010 or 2011. That's when we want the movie made. So you either make it now, you either start work right now, or you leave. And Sam Raimi left. And what's massively ironic is that Sam Raimi said he needed until 2012 to make Spider-Man 4. Guess what year the Amazing Spider-Man reboot came out? 2012. The reboot was completely unnecessary. Which is one reason why I was a little bit hostile towards it at the beginning. Not just because of how completely unnecessarily it was from a business standpoint, but it was just so soon to be rebooting a franchise from scratch. This wasn't continuing the franchise with a different director. This was just completely kicking out, he threw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. But it could have worked out, and the original concept was to have Peter Parker go back to high school and have low-budget superhero adventures. It would, be more gritty and darker to sort of, reflect the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight movies, which were making a ton of money during the production. Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007, I believe, and The Dark Knight came out in 2008, the year after. So it was pretty much the big thing. It was the sort of talking point for blockbusters that it needs to be dark and gritty if it needs to succeed and make money. Completely incorrect, of course, as Marvel would ultimately prove, but that was the purveying factor when creating comic book movies from other studios at that time. So what happens is that the first one comes out, it does pretty well, but it is the lowest grossing overall. And during the development of the movie, it's just all over the friggin' place. It was just an absolute mess behind the scenes. Not just the Sam Raimi stuff. I'm not talking about the quality of the movie. I think it's bad. I'm just talking about the actual facts, the behind the scenes stuff. When it comes to my answer to this question, I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible concerning my thoughts on the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, the reboot series. It was a mess behind the scenes. It was originally meant to be like a 80 million, 100 million budget Spider-Man movie. Low budget, meant to focus more on the character stuff. But what ultimately happened is that the Amazing Spider-Man movie, it was kind of hijacked by producers to be much more action-heavy. It ultimately cost $230 million to make. It was over double the budget they originally proposed for it. It was completely insane. Mark Webb, the director, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he is completely unsuited to the blockbuster format that the movie originally turned out to be. His only film credit beforehand was 500 Days of Summer, which it's a decent film. It's good. It's a decent romantic comedy, but it's a low budget rom-com with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel. It costs like $5 million to make. It's hardly you don't just go from 500 Days of Summer to friggin' Spider-Man. So that sort of transition makes sense if you want to make a low-budget Spider-Man movie that's more focused on the romance and Peter Parker's high school years. But the producers ultimately hijacked the movie and said, no, we need the lizard, we need action, we need a motion-captured Rhys-Ifans, and stuff like that. We need a tower falling at the end. We need all this high-budget stuff. Go for it. And that's ultimately, because Mark Webb making a low-budget Spider-Man film makes sense. Mark Webb making a tentpole blockbuster completely out of his comfort zone doesn't make a lick of sense. So that's the first bad decision here. But the next big problem coming for the Amazing Spider-Man is the fact that the movie, while being made, was setting up a sequel. It was setting up the Amazing Spider-Man 2 and a new franchise and a new trilogy of films or whatever. But they had no idea where it was going. There's the post-credit scene for the Amazing Spider-Man, where Dr. Kirk Connors is in a prison cell, and a man in the shadows just appears out of the shadows from nowhere. He just seemed to be in the prison cell anyway, and says if Peter knows the truth about his family. And Connor says no, and says no, you leave Peter alone. But then the man disappears in the shadows. There's a flash of lightning and the man disappears. What happened a week or two after the release of The Amazing Spider-Man is that the writers were interviewed and they were asked, who is the man in the shadows? They said, we don't know. That is the writers openly admitting that they set up a sequel having no idea where it was going. They openly admit it. People were saying, is it Electro because there's a flash of lightning and he disappears? Was he Norman Osborn? And the writers were just going, like that. Okay, that is putting the cart before the horse to ridiculously stupid extent. And then you've got the mystery for Peter's parents. They probably didn't even know remotely where that was going. And there was the marketing where they were saying, there was the marketing where there was all those clips that weren't even in the finished movie, indicating that this movie was cut like hell. It was a production nightmare. Whether or not you like the movie, you can like it, that's fine, you hate it, whatever, but you cannot deny it was a mess behind the scenes, and certain aspects of the film show that. And it was absolutely insane. And then The Amazing Spider-Man 2 comes out, and all of the problems are exacerbated. They're still teasing sequels that they don't have a clue what they're doing. They're still continuing the stupid mystery behind Peter's parents, which doesn't make a lick of sense. They throw in a load of villains. They have more misleading marketing. The marketing for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a blatant lie. It was just talking about how it's his greatest challenge. He's going to be fighting all of these villains, and there's no like 2-on-1 confrontation or 3-on-1 confrontation. The Spider-Man fights all of them individually. Many of them don't even appear in the same scenes together. Complete wasted opportunity as far as I'm concerned. They have Felicity Jones looking completely lost on screen. She's a brilliant actress, but she looks completely lost here. She basically only shows up to say, my name is Black Cat, I'm going to be in the sequel, I promise. They cut out Shailene Woodley as Mary Jane Watson. They cut her out completely. They have massive reshoots. One of the reshot scenes was the scene where Spider-Man webs Gwen Stacy to the back of the car. The reason that scene was included in the reshoots was to make sure that Peter Parker was not culpable for what happened at the end of the movie. It was to sort of get rid of all of his culpability, to make him a very innocent party. The ending of that movie, I've gone over it before, the ending was a complete mistake. Pretty much, the ending was just, I can't think of a single good thing it did. Even looking back, that hand coming out of the web was a stupid idea. So yeah, it was a complete mess behind the scenes, but all that would have been fine if it made money. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, despite being one of the most costly Spider-Man movies, actually made the least amount of money. And not just in terms of costly for its budget, it had a ridiculous marketing campaign. The marketing for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the biggest production budget that I have ever heard of. It had a production budget close to the actual budget of the movie itself, about $190 million. The average marketing campaign for a tentpole blockbuster is $50 to $60 million. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 cost 4 times that. And there was so much marketing for The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that somebody actually compiled all of the trailers together for the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, put all of the clips together, put them in what they thought would be the order in the movie, because this was before the film came out. And it turned out that for The Amazing Spider-Man, a film that clocks in at how many hours? Let's have a look. The Amazing Spider-Man 1 clocks in at 136 minutes long. This guy who edited all of the trailers together produced a 97-minute cut of the movie. They literally gave away an entire feature-length film in just the marketing alone. And it shows sort of Sony's lack of faith in the movie. They know they're making bad movies. They know that these are bad, but they have to throw in so much marketing to let people know that they've already seen the movie, because the entire financial capability of the marketing of this movie studio is sort of in the balance for these films, which is why they're so important to Sony. But the movie actually, no matter what people say, this movie lost Sony a lot of money, and the hacks that came, the Sony hacks that happened last year sort of proved that, with Amy Pascal saying during email conversations that she guaranteed investors that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was going to be $1 billion movie, and that it, quote, needed to be $1 billion movie. That needed is a quote. This movie needed to be $1 billion film, and it wasn't. So the planned Sinister Six movie, probably not going to happen. The planned Venom movie, also probably not going to happen, because this is the lowest grossing Spider-Man film to date. So, let's actually get to Dean's question. It took a while. Right, what do you think will/should happen? Okay, what I would do, so in other words, what Sony should do, is that there are a couple of people invested in the Peter's parents storyline, in the villains and stuff like that. People are invested in that. I can't imagine why, but people actually are. So, you know what? Make a third installment. Just cut the budget. Do not spend so much money on a third movie, and have that be the closing chapter. Make this the end of another trilogy. Cut your losses. finish the story, actually finish what you have set up, instead of just setting more up, which is just classic Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci, who are the writers of the film. They're just terrible writers, but actually finish the story and cut your losses. Hope that The Amazing Spider-Man 3 makes a little bit of money for you, and then either hold on to the rights until they expire and they go back to Marvel. Because when you think about Sony, you're not just thinking about a movie company with Columbia Pictures. Sony own an electronics division, a video games division, and while the film division is doing okay, what happens is that Sony tends to make like a couple of dozen films a year, small films, that do pretty well. They're small films, they make decent profits. Like, I can't think of it, like 22 Jump Street, it was not a massive tentpole blockbuster like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it was modestly budgeted, and it made money. However, what they do is that they make films like The Amazing Spider-Man 2 or After Earth, remember that, the M. Night Shyamalan film, and that ultimately ends up losing the company a lot of money, so they might as well be back to square one. So Sony Pictures either like pretty much winds up back at square one, or they only just break even. But their electronics division is hemorrhaging money. Their video games division, while doing well compared to many other video game companies, is not very profitable at the moment, because they're still early days on the PlayStation 4. It will still be a couple of years before that division becomes profitable again. And the movie division not doing so great. So Sony as a company as a whole is kind of really on the downward, because that electronics division is making the company as a whole hemorrhage money. So what they need to do is that I think they need to cut their losses with the franchise, make a third installment in the vein of the Spectacular Spider-Man series, because how Series 1 of the Spectacular Spider-Man ended, it's a great cartoon, by the way. It is not unreasonable to ask a $200 or $230 million theatrical live-action movie with thousands of people involved, being paid a lot of money, to be at least as good as a slightly low budget cartoon series from a couple of years ago. It is not unreasonable to expect that. But the Spectacular Spider-Man is a great cartoon, and how Series 1 ended was that the Sinister Six united, they beat the crap out of Spider-Man, and what happened is that Spider-Man encountered the symbiote suit, and while he's asleep one night, the symbiote suit takes over his body and beats up the Sinister Six, and then he wakes up, sees the news, like Spider-Man takes down the Sinister Six in a really cool costume, and then he has to have an inner battle with the symbiote suit. I think that would be The Amazing Spider-Man 3. You have the Sinister Six, you have Venom, and then you can end the franchise with Peter overcoming his inner demons. Like, maybe his inner demons are he wants to live up to his father's legacy or atone for his past sins with Gwen and Harry. Those are his inner demons, and that could be the end of the franchise. And then at the end, the final shot of The Amazing Spider-Man 3 is Peter Parker at the Daily Bugle. He's late for work or something, and he bumps into somebody in the street. What's your name? Mary Jane Watson. Want to go out for dinner sometime? There we go. Cut to the credits. Sony, hire me please, because I think that's a really good idea. But what do I think Sony will do? Well, with the firing of Amy Pascal from the head of Sony Entertainment, at least, she's going to become a producer, and they say that she voluntarily stepped down, but no, she was fired after that. Sony had completely unprofessional behaviour, and I don't think any other company is going to touch her for a while, so Sony kind of has to take her in. But I think what's going to happen is that they're going to try and really push this Sinister Six movie, and if that doesn't work out, they're probably... I don't know what they'll do. I think the thing about the Amazing Spider-Man series is that the way it's constructed, these stupid mysteries, these terrible writers, the incredibly poor way they've set up these characters and these villains, is that this franchise is kind of broken from a fundamental standpoint. It is rotten to the core. It is built on terrible foundations. So no matter what they do for the third installment, it's probably not going to turn out that good, because it's being created on such putrid ground. And not just like the quality of the films, it's just the whole production. Sony don't want to make these movies for the creative aspects of it. They want to do it because they want a money maker. They want to keep this franchise, because apart from James Bond, they really don't have another franchise right now, at least another franchise that can pull in 500 million worldwide at the box office. But what's going to happen? I think they are going to go ahead for the Amazing Spider-Man 3. But the future, like they have Amazing Spider-Man 4 in the pipeline. Apparently, they have a release date. No, they don't have a release date. They have a release date for the Amazing Spider-Man 3 in 2018, because that was pushed back. But Venom, that's not going to happen. Sinister Six might happen, or they might combine Sinister Six into Amazing Spider-Man 3 like I think they should. But what do I think they'll do? I don't know, because I'm coming from a place of logic, and if you've heard about the production of any of these films, you'll know that logic is not in this film filmmaking team's resume. It's just not there. Right from the very decision to say, Sam Raimi, you want to make a Spider-Man film by 2012? No, you're fired. Let's make a Spider-Man film for 2012. It's God. Anyway, according to the Sony hacks, they even attempted to get Sam Raimi back to direct a new trilogy for the character, and they had meetings with Marvel, which there was supposed to be a Spider-Man summit last month, but we've not heard anything from that. I'm assuming the summit took place, but the information hasn't been made public yet. Wait until Comic-Con for anything like that. But then there's this female-centered spin-off, which obviously they have no plans at all. They just are really just throwing a dart at a dartboard with just different Spider-Man characters and saying, you get a movie, Aunt May prequel where she's a super spy. Yeah, you get a prequel. But yeah, this vlog's going on for way too long. But yeah, thank you very much for writing in, Dean. And Dean actually has a suggestion of his own. He says, and I quote, I think if Sony do make The Amazing Spider-Man 3, then they really need to get in good writers this time. Also have a sense of focus, as opposed to The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was just scenes thrown together. If the rights do go back to Marvel Studios, I'm not sure who I would cast, but I think that Andrew Garfield should be given another chance. As terrible as his Peter Parker is, he was entertaining as Spider-Man. And that's another thing. Thank you very much, Dean. That's another thing to come out of the Sony hack, that they're thinking of getting rid of Andrew Garfield. And if Marvel were to reboot the franchise, then they'd get rid of Garfield as well. I think that's... Andrew Garfield, he seems like such a nice guy, and he loves the character of Spider-Man. You can tell when he's doing interviews and at conventions, he loves the character. But he's not Spider-Man in those movies. He's an absolute twat. But that's not Andrew Garfield's fault. That's the writing. I think he would make a good Peter Parker, or Spider-Man, maybe in his later years when he's more confident. But I mean, as in the character, like in his later years, once he becomes adjusted to his powers and he's more confident as a person. But yeah, and I think Andrew Garfield should be given a chance if the franchise does go back to Marvel, because I think he can be good. He's just not been given the opportunity to shine. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Amazing Spider-Man, the future of the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. Let me know, guys and girls, what you either think Sony will do or what they should do in the comment section below. If you'd like to contribute to any of these Trilbee vlogs in the future, then be sure to visit my Patreon, like Dean Jones did, and he's awesome for doing so. He's helping to keep the lights on here at Trilbee Reviews, which I massively appreciate. There's lots of other perks there, such as all of my review scripts and all of my reviews from the website. Don't forget to visit my website. I've got reviews coming up this week of The Interview, Shaun the Sheep Movie, and Jupiter Ascending, so be sure to check back for those. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble for about 20 minutes, and I shall see you guys and girls next time.